Hello, and welcome to the Free Film School podcast. Free Film School is a non-profit organization that offers uninstitutionalized free film and creative lessons for creatives in South Africa. This podcast is a snippet from one of our live classes on scene writing, facilitated by queer writer, director, and actor Gabe Gabriel.
Let's talk about what a scene is. A scene, very loosely speaking, is a series of shots, or it can be one single take. Some directors like to show off in that way. Where it's in one place and usually in one time. I suppose that there are always rule breaking in cinema, but generally speaking, that is a very good distillation of what a scene is, right? So if in film, even if we had a conversation or some action happening between, say, two characters in this room, if we then moved to another room in this building in sort of chronological time, in real time, the next room would have to be a different scene. Right? And that's mostly for the sake of production, because it's a whole crew setting up in one room. That whole crew can't then follow you unless there's a very big setup. They can't generally follow you through to another space in the same location. You'd have to have a whole new setup. So we do that. It's also for the audience's sake. There's just something about the audience mind that views one location as one scene. And so each scene should have a sort of beginning, middle, and end before it moves on to the next location. You will see in some of the examples that will have what's called a sequence, which is 1, 2 or 3 or 4, sometimes 10 scenes put together for one kind of main idea, one arc of a scene, but it is in different locations. That's okay. But for today's purpose and for the writing exercises we're going to do, try to keep all your scenes in one location, because that is generally the rule. In a film or in a TV show, scenes are basically the chain links that are linking the beginning, the very first thing that you see, to the very last thing you see at the end, right? So those links have to go sort of an ABCD form or 1, 2, 3, 4 form. They have to grow to a certain point, to a climax in your film, and resolve. But within each scene, you'll have a similar kind of arc to the overall arc of any story form. And there's kind of a general agreement across all writing. Obviously, there are always like avant-garde things and rule breakers, but there's a general rule that every story can be broken up into kind of 3 acts, or the idea of a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? Very simply. So in the case of a scene, what you want to make sure is that the beginning is, you're just telling the audience, here's where we are and who we're with, like a basic establishing. That can take one line, or it can take half a page or a whole page. But the point of it is to just situate the audience in the scenario that you are now going to show them. Then you go straight into the middle, which is kind of the meat of the scene. And that can be, however short or long, it has to have some kind of navigation of, you might have a little bit of sort of fun and games, people figuring out how something works. A problem should kind of be, make itself clear in the middle section. And there should be a bit of a build to either a turning point in the scene or to a climax in the scene. And that can be seen as a battle, like a literal battle, to people fighting over something, because every scene is about opposing wants and needs between the characters. Or it can be, you don't have to think of the battle as something that is always literal. The battle can be an internal conflict, someone trying to make a decision about something. It can be a discussion. It can be even making the decision to do something in that moment that tells the audience, okay, we now know that person's what they're going to do next, or we wonder what they're going to do next, right? And remember, the point when you're writing with film and TV is always that you're trying to make the audience want to see what's coming next, right? You don't generally want them to switch off here. So your middle section should deal with that negotiation, and that should be the bulk of your tension. Then the end of a scene, you can either do a trick where you don't have a typical end. So you have the sort of climax or the tension, and you can cut there so that you know that the audience is going to need to watch the next scene to understand what the characters decided to do with this new problem. Or you can show an end, which would either be a resolve, or if it was an argument between two people, one of them wins, and then the audience has got to feel, okay, I need to see what happens next because the character I was rooting for lost, so what are they going to do next, or what have you, right? You want to always keep the scene, each scene should stand on its own well, but you want to keep in mind where the character's going next and where the character has come from. That's the given circumstances. Your beginning shows a little bit from where the character has come from, and your end should propel us into what they need to do next for their overall goal in the story. The first question is always how to start your scene or where to start your scene. You'll hear me speak a lot today about coming in late and leaving early. We don't generally want to see we as in the audience, don't generally want to see the kind of mundane steps that it takes to get to the interesting part. The audience just wants the juicy part. So if I were to write the scene of all of you walking in here today, I could do a little jump cut montage of, the room filling up and Jenna doing the intro and then us starting. But if, I don't know, a brawl was about to break out and in our scene in this room, then I would imagine as the screenwriter that the audience will want to get to that as soon as possible. So I will spend a quarter to a half a page max on everyone getting in. You don't want to see each person sign in and take their temperature. That stuff is, unless someone in here has got some sort of major fever and the zombie apocalypse is going to break out, then you could show that. But if it's not important to the main tension in the story, skip as much of the beginning as you can to just give the audience exactly what they need and then get to the main tension of the scene, right? So that's how you'll decide to start it. However, it's easier said than done. So sometimes you'll write a scene starting with too much information at the beginning because you're still figuring out where your tension is going and what your characters really want and how they're going to try and achieve that. So you can write a little extra at the front, and then when you come back to edit, because most of writing is rewriting, I'm sure you've heard, that's when you'll go and be like, okay, wow, the audience really doesn't need to know these 4 pages of beautiful description and character building that I've put in. I love this part and this part the best. I'm going to sort of put that at the front and then go straight into the tension. Then the next question will be, once you've gotten into the writing of the scene, how to end it. And I spoke a little bit just now about sometimes it's great to cut right in the middle of the tension, right? You cut to your next scene and let the audience imagine what happened next. If this brawl were to break out in this room, for example, I don't know why I went to that example, but we're there. If this brawl were to break out, you could see a full-on scuffle. Maybe people are fighting over this microphone, for example, because inside it they find out there's a diamond and someone's doing a heist. Whatever your story is, there's a brawl over this microphone. You could cut at the moment where everyone has piled up on top of the person who's got it, and you cut there, and we don't see who ended up with it. But your next scene might open with everyone, I don't know, being wagged a finger at by Jenna before fighting and everything, and we don't know whose pocket it's in. Or you might see the scene through to the end and you see who manages to grab it and run, and then the next thing we're going to see is a whole running chase scene with all 40 of us chasing one person down the street. So it depends where your next scene is going, how you want to effectively end the current scene. The big rule that I will give you, the 2 big rules are get in late and arrive late and get out early. And the second one is try to always show and not tell. We are in a visual medium. A screenplay is a blueprint for some people to go and put it on screen. So as much as we love clever writing and beautiful description and, smart clues for showing the audience what's happening, if you are doing in the action lines, if you are going to tell someone, Gabe was sitting in front of the class teaching, but he was actually thinking about the fact that he didn't have dinner last night and so his stomach is grumbling. If you talk about what someone is thinking or he wishes that blah, 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 that will, you can't show that on screen, right? So you want to try and always only, when you read through your first draft of your script, check where you have told the audience something that they can't see. If they were watching it and not reading it, and they can't see that thing, it shouldn't technically be written in the script. The one exception is when you introduce a character for the first time in your film or your TV show, you can give a little tidbit about them. Say you wanted to say, Max is a 25-year-old person who is hyper anxious and very worried what people think, for example. I hope there isn't a Max here. If there is, oh, there is. Congratulations, Max, you're the lead of the film. So, for example, you could do that. You could give a little insight into the character, but it should be a couple words max. And even then, there are some screenwriting teachers who say, and writers who say that you should only give a visual then as well. So now we're going to read King Richard first. The best way to learn how to write scripts, in my opinion, is to read scripts. So that's why I've got you reading them, because not only do you learn a lot about formatting by getting used to what a script looks like on a page, you know, the dialogue is in the middle, the action lines, there are slug lines at the top that give you the time of day and the location and stuff. But it also just helps you. We're going to see a different script just now where you'll see it's far too long. It's, I think, like 8 pages. Every scene should, rule of thumb, be less than 3 or 4. Obviously, always rule breakers, but that's the limitation we're going to give ourselves today, and that you should generally give yourself. Okay, so let's begin reading and then we'll chat about it. Cool, very nice, thank you. So I'm going to shoot out some questions now and you can answer as you wish. So where does the scene take place? What are the clues about where? Outside their house, we've got Compton. We've got I gave you the little scene before just to give you a sense of the place where he's driving through Compton. But yes, outside their house in the neighborhood. And what can you derive about when the scene takes place? In the day, yes. Can you feel sort of a more specific time than that? It doesn't say specifically, but what would you guess? Yeah. Feels like afternoon, right? Because the kids aren't at school and they're off to tennis practice. The mother clearly she's clearly a night nurse. So she's done the laundry during the day and she's looked after the kids and made sure their homework is done, and now she's going to night nurse. And they describe the house as small. So that gives us a clue, without ever having to tell us, it gives us a clue as to their sort of socio and economic status, right? They have 5 kids, they are working multiple jobs, and they're trying to teach the kids tennis, right? There's a lot going on for them. Then who's in the scene? We have a Miss Strickland, Venus and Serena. Yeah, we have the sisters, the siblings, exactly. Cool. So the 3 other siblings don't speak. This is, by the way, not the first scene in the movie. The first scene in the movie, or the first sequence in the movie, is the father going and talking to various tennis coaches, trying to get them to coach Serena and Venus for free, but and failing at it. So we've got a sense already that he's a hardworking dad who's just trying to get his kids a break, and he's struggling. And then he comes home and he starts coaching them himself. So we know we have a kind of antagonistic character in this scene, the neighbor. She is not the antagonist of the whole film, but she is an example of people who are going to be really strict on Richard about how hard he pushes his kids, and an example of someone who, for whatever her reasons, kind of wants to bring him down, right? The film is about him. It's about the kids as well, but it's King Richard's mostly about him. Then we also get a good sense of the mother and father, and what can you tell about them from this scene? Yes, wanting to make sure that everyone in the family is taken care of, loving relationship between the two of them. What you see as well, which is a really nice clue into what the rest of the film is going to slowly show you, is the mother says at the end something about if you don't turn those hips, keep turning those hips if you want to get power. You get the sense that even though she's off to her work as a nurse, she's also coaching them, right? So this is not only the King Richard show. Both the parents are coaching them. The other big clue they give you at the end of this scene, that is a little sort of Easter egg for much later, is that Serena is one of 5 kids who jumps out of the van to go give mom an extra hug. Much later in the film, sorry for the spoiler alert, but you all know how the story really ends. Much later in the film, when Richard is focusing on Venus's career as the older kid, the mom is quietly in the background training Serena, right? So this already in scene, basically one of the film, the introduction scene of all the characters, we're getting that little nugget of information that Serena and mom are close, and that mom's actually going to train Serena while Richard's so busy with Venus. Okay, so you're seeing how there are a lot of clues that are given here without the screenwriter sort of analyzing the family and just telling us these things. They've got to show us very subtly. Another big thing that you should think about when you're writing an opening scene or an introductory scene where you get to meet all your lead characters is that this isn't a rule of thumb because it doesn't have to be this way, but it's sometimes helpful to think of the first introductory scene as a chance to tell the audience everything that they need to know for the whole movie in very clever little ways, like that Serena and the mom moment. The introductory scene feeling like a little window into all the kind of aspects of the film that you're going to get throughout the next hour and 20 minutes, or 3 hours if it's a Marvel, or 10 hours if it's a series, that's an opportunity to tell your audience, hey, this is what this movie is going to feel like. There's going to be some antagonism from across the road. There's going to be a very close family with a pair of parents who are very loving with each other and who are very who push the kids a lot, right? That's what you get from this scene, and that is basically what you get from the whole movie once you've watched it. There are opposing opinions on this. The absolute rule is that the first time you see a character, they should be capitalized, and that's for production's sake. When production is going through the script and trying to figure out who are all the speaking roles and who do we need to cast, that's why we do that. Then the other kind of general rule that I think, and Jenna, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the other general rule for formatting is capitalizing sounds, because we know that those are, if a train swooshes past and there's a big train horn, you capitalize that sound so that jump in. Then if there's a close-up on something, if, say, we were doing the mic scene that we spoke about earlier and whoever knows that there's a diamond inside, say, for example, it's Bonnie, looks at it, and you see their eyes sort of go to there, you might put the mic in capitals to know that the camera should also focus on it for a moment. So it's a close-up. However, that's not a rule. You don't have to capitalize every close-up you have. Even if I think of myself as a writer, I generally only capitalize big sounds, and part of that is so that the reader goes, okay, that's a big sound, but it also will, as Jenna said, signal to the mixer that needs to be in there. But I will generally only do capital letters on a character, or if something is like extremely, I really, really want the reader to understand that this is absolutely important. That's up to you in dialogue. Some people underline, I don't generally do that. Some people put it in italics and some people put it in capitals. Some people do all three. It's kind of up to you, and different readers have different preferences as well. Some readers will look at a lot of capitals and go like, ew, why are you shouting at me? But maybe the writer wants you to feel that way. If you have a narrator, that'll come in like the rest of the dialogue. It'll say narrator, and it'll usually say in brackets voiceover. Or if your narrator, for example, was Serena Williams, it would say Serena voiceover, so that you know that she's not speaking on screen. The other thing that you'll see in parentheticals next to the name, if they're not on screen, is OS, which stands for off screen. And then you'll see, do they have them anywhere here? Sometimes when you want to, no, they don't have it in the script. When you want to give the reader a clue as to how the line is being delivered or what the person is doing while they're delivering it, you'll see in brackets beneath the name of the character, but before the dialogue starts and slightly more in the margin, you'll see something in brackets, for example, angrily. However, I would strongly suggest not telling the actors how to do their job, because you're the writer. You do your job. So you generally don't want to tell the camera what it's doing. If you start using jib and track and pan and all of that, unless you are the writer-director and you have a little bit more freedom with that, or there's something very specific to it, like we track to reveal something, you can get away with it. There isn't a hard and fast rule. You won't be instantly fired. But you do want to stick to what your job is, which is writing the story, right? Let the actors and directors do their job. Let the actor do that. They'll do that better than you. That's exactly right. And so I think a good test of what Jen is saying is read it without, if you put your parentheticals in and then you take them out, does the meaning stay the same? If, for example, in this last example, I was talking to the entire group and then I wanted to say, could you grab that for me, to Eliana? If I spoke to the entire group and then left out the parentheticals where it says to Eliana and said, could you grab that for me? The reader won't understand who I'm asking. Yeah. Must everyone now get up and grab something? You know what I'm saying? So you need it to advance the meaning. Same with sarcastically. You could get it really wrong if you think the person means something genuinely if the writer meant it sarcastically, right? Whereas angrily or, she looks away as she says, that's up to the actor. The actor should do their job well, right? So, however, I will give you a little insight into, as was mentioned before, sometimes you write a script to get financing, to get people to read it and fall in love with the story. And then later you go and do polish or rewrite on that script once you've got the funding and you're going into production. In the latest thing that I've been working on, I had a lot more hints in the action and in parentheses as to how things are being delivered and what the feeling is emotionally. Because when you're reading something, you can't necessarily glean it as well. However, now that we're in casting and the actors are there, that you can see something on an actor's face, or the actor will take it somewhere else. So you can take all of that stuff out and allow more freedom for the rest of the creatives. So I always have a draft that is more for being read and then more for being made. There's a small difference, but the difference is there. Okay, let's identify who does it feel like in this scene is the main character, if you could guess, without looking at the title of the film. Feels like Richard, right? He is the one who is more active than passive, right? So even though we see the kids, Serena and Venus, going and dropping the phone books at each neighbor's house, there isn't a main conflict that happens to them and no one else. The main conflict happens to Richard. He is criticized in front of his kids about how he parents. He comes up to meet her and fight her on that. His wife calls him away from it, saying that she's just trying to tear you down. So the main action that is happening to Richard. Even though the writer's wanting to introduce you to the whole family and the setting, and they're all important characters, we understand that we're kind of in Richard's shoes for this film. We're understanding that the animosity is not actually towards the kids in this moment, though it'll come. It's towards the father. And that's because the writer has decided, and the producers and whoever have decided to make this a film about parenting. It's more about parenting than about the sport. Considering that Richard is the main character, what we've spoken about him being up against in this scene, and to foreshadow for the rest of the film, is someone trying to stop him from pushing his kids so hard, right? That's clearly the main bit of tension in the scene. Then what would you say is stopping him from getting what he wants in the scene? It's a hard one because here someone else wants something. Ms. Strickland wants him to stop being so hard on the kids. You're not seeing it from Richard's point of view of wanting to do something, but that's because the previous scenes you were seeing what his want for the film is, which was to get the kids coaching and to get their tennis careers to take off. So we know his want coming into the scene, having seen the previous ones. But in this scene, the main want comes from the antagonist in the scene, Ms. Strickland. She wants him to stop being so hard on the kids, stop working them so hard. We don't know why, what's in it for her as a neighbor to get him to stop being hard on his kids. But there is a clue in the dialogue. Can anyone tell me what the clue is as to why she might have a dog in this fight? It's a very, very small clue. All Richard says is, I'm writing a book about it. Maybe I can give one to your daughter. And that makes her cross. We don't explain why or what's happened to her daughter. We just know that she's obviously insecure about where her daughter has ended up. And that's maybe why she doesn't want him to push his daughter so hard, because she's insecure or what have you. So we get a little clue there. You see how we're mining clues? When it comes to your writing, you're kind of wanting to retroactively put those clues in. Keeping it subtle, keeping the characters from saying the very obvious thing. He doesn't go into great detail about why she wouldn't want his daughters to thrive. All he has to say is, should I give a book to your daughter? And we know from that there's something there. That's the kind of subtle clue giving you want to give in your writing. Sometimes you can be more on the nose than others, and quite often your first drafts, your earlier drafts, you'll want to say the exact things that the characters mean, and then you can go back later and pare that down and peel it away so that you're not making the audience feel like you're just giving them everything. The audience doesn't generally want to feel spoon-fed. If you look at soapy writing, for example, there's a bit more spoon-feeding, but that's because the genre calls for that and allows for that, and people want to kind of escape and not think as hard. So if you're writing a soapy, you can get away with more. Or even a telenovela or what have you. There are certain genres that ask for that slightly more on-the-nose dialogue, because that's what people want out of the genre, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you are, however, going for sort of a nouveau type arty film, or you are going for like a serious family drama or something, think about a serious family drama. Think about how we speak in real life. When we're talking about everyday things, we might say the exact thing we mean. Sometimes we might not, although quite often we don't. Someone says, how are you? You go, I'm great. And you don't mean that at all. So look for where in your life you see us saying things other than what we mean, and you'll see how often we do that, or how we try to make something smaller when it actually feels really big to us, or how, all of those interpersonal conversations. Generally, I would say try to write the way we speak. Don't write the way we teach writing. That's a general rule. If you had to identify the beginning, middle, and end, what would you say? What do you think is the beginning, and where does it shift into more of a middle? I chose the scene specifically for this reason. It is a very clear beginning, middle, and end. Beginning, setting up the kids and their dynamic, which, by the way, look how nicely they show that Serena is the pusher. Venus is the older sibling, and she's the one who's going to see success first in the tennis world, and she's going to see huge success. But even in this film, and sorry for the spoiler alert, but at some point when she loses a match, her first concern is not, I lost and I'm bad at tennis. Her first concern is, I've disappointed everyone, they're not going to love me anymore. Venus is drawn, I don't know how true this is to them in real life, but Venus is drawn in this film as the slightly less go-getter. She's still extremely driven, and she still makes like massive successes in her tennis career in her teen years, which is what the film covers. But it's shown very well in this first interaction between Serena and Venus that Serena's the one who wants to be better than her older sister, wants to be better than everyone. I will carry 4 massive phone books as the smaller kid than my older sister, who my dad is training to be a tennis champ. And the older sister doesn't go, the older sister might be like, yeah, you're going to break your back while you're at it, but the older sister doesn't trample Serena. They're close and they're loving with each other, but they have 2 different character styles and 2 different innate needs. Serena is, I need to be the best. Venus is, I want to be loved. I want everyone to get along. I want to do well, but it's more about her personal relationships than it is about the tennis. If you had to really analyze the whole film and then see how they show you that in the opening scene between the 2 of them, right? That's just an example of what I said earlier, of if you can give clues to the themes of the entire film in the first few minutes, off to the races. Okay, almost done with this one. What would you say, identify as the turning point, the main turning point in the scene? I'll give you a clue. The turning point should be near the end of the middle and the beginning of the end. Yes. The turning point is, you'll see his wife turns him away from the conflict. His wife says that, you could say that's part of the turning point. It's about to turn towards maybe more of a fight. And then Brandy comes and says, no. Yeah, leave her alone. So at that point, it could go in either direction, and Brandy brings it back into a resolution, right? What we said earlier about how you could have your battle scene end in the middle of the battle, if this scene was written differently and the story was going to go somewhere else, and these 2 were going to be the main antagonist and protagonist, the writer might have ended it at that thing of, should I give it to your daughter? That could have been the end of the scene, and we'd need to watch, what's the next scene? Are they fighting? Are they being held across the street from each other? What's the tension? But because she is not the main antagonist, this was just a clue into what kind of antagonism they're going to experience throughout the film. So the wife was able to draw him away, and that's the turning point. The turning point of, it could have gone this way, but it actually went that way. I'm going to give you a scenario, and you're going to write. You have the rare privilege of not having to figure out how the story is going to end, so have fun with it. And okay, here's a good example of a audience hook. How many of you have seen How to Get Away with Murder? Okay, a few of you. It's the TV show with Viola Davis by Shonda Rhimes. And the opening scene, if you know nothing about the story, that's fine, because the opening scene it's a college campus. There's absolute debauchery happening everywhere. People are drinking and jumping off cars, and it's a huge party night on campus. One of the characters even says, the biggest party night of the year on campus. We see a bit of this, and the camera sort of swirls through everyone into some trees, into a sort of forest area on campus, where there are 4 extremely smart law students in their first year. All of these clues are given in the opening scene, and they are arguing like law students would, not like I would. They're arguing with legalese, how they're going to whether they should get rid of a body that they've murdered, or whether they should leave it at the site of the murder. They also have the murder weapon. Eventually, they decide to flip a coin because time is not on their side and they can't come to an agreement because they're all such good arguers. So they decide to flip a coin to decide what they're going to do with the body. The coin flips in the air. As it's in the air, we cut to 6 months earlier. That immediately makes you go, how did these 4 goody two-shoes law students end up killing someone and flipping a coin over what to do with the body? So that's the kind of scene I want to see from you now, right? It can be that you know, Shonda writes like that. She writes in a very kind of hooky way. You want to hook the audience so that we're going to want to see the rest of the show.